The stars looked different from Jupiter orbit. Captain James Walker stood at the main viewport of the HSI Defiant, watching the massive gas giants whirling storms below. His weathered hands clasped behind his back, knuckles white with tension. 20 years of space combat experience told him these might be humanity's final hours. The Defiant's bridge crew worked in tense silence, broken only by the soft beeping of sensor equipment and quiet status reports. They all knew what was coming. The Dominion's main fleet had just passed Saturn's orbit, over 10,000 warships strong. Against them stood the last 300 ships of the human fleet, gathered here in humanity's last stand. "Status report on the resonance cascade system," Walker called out, his voice steady despite the weight pressing down on his shoulders. The experimental weapon was their only hope, their last chance to prove that humanity wouldn't go quietly into the night. "Integration at 68%, Captain," replied Lieutenant Rogers from her engineering station. "Chief Miller says he needs at least 2 more hours before the system will be combat ready." Walker nodded, knowing they wouldn't have 2 hours. The Dominion fleet was pushing their engines hard, eager to finish what they'd started 3 years ago when they first attacked Earth's colonies. Since then, it had been a steady retreat, watching human worlds fall one by one to the alien superior technology. But the Defiant was different. She was humanity's newest warship, built with technology reverse-engineered from crashed Dominion vessels. More importantly, she carried the results of Project Thunderbolt, a weapon that could theoretically exploit a fundamental weakness in Dominion shield systems. If it worked, it would change everything. If it failed, humanity would join the long list of civilizations the Dominion had crushed beneath their boots. "Captain," called out Jones from the sensor station, his young face pale in the blue glow of his screens. Long-range scans picking up something strange. "The Dominion fleet, they're splitting up." Walker strode to the sensor station, studying the tactical display. The massive red blob representing the Dominion fleet was indeed separating into 3 distinct groups. It was a departure from their usual tactics of overwhelming force. "They're being cautious," Walker muttered, more to himself than the crew. "They know about the Defiant. They know we've built something new." The realization hit him like a physical blow. If the Dominion was showing caution, it meant their spies had learned about Project Thunderbolt. They didn't know exactly what it did, but they knew it was dangerous enough to change their standard tactics. "Send word to Admiral Stone," Walker ordered. "The Dominion knows about the Defiant. They'll try to take us out first." He paused, considering their options. "And get me Chief Miller. Now." Minutes later, the chief engineer's gruff voice came through the bridge speakers. "Miller here, Captain. We're working as fast as we can, but rushing the integration could blow us all to hell." "We don't have a choice, Tom," Walker replied, using the engineer's first name, something he rarely did. "The Dominion is coming for us specifically. How close to their ships do we need to be for the resonance cascade to work?" There was a long pause. "Theoretically, no more than 50,000 kilometers. But, Captain, the equations we're working with, they're more complex than anything humanity has ever attempted. We're talking about manipulating quantum fields in ways that shouldn't be possible." "That's why they'll never see it coming," Walker said. "Keep working. We'll buy you all the time we can." He turned to his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Reed, plot a course deeper into Jupiter's gravity well. We'll use the radiation belts to mask our energy signature." The massive warship turned gracefully, its dark hull gleaming in Jupiter's reflected sunlight. The Defiant was beautiful in a functional way, sleek yet powerful, with none of the ornate designs the Dominion favored. She was built for one purpose: to fight back. As they descended toward Jupiter's upper atmosphere, Walker received a priority message from Admiral Stone. The old Admiral's face appeared on his private screen, looking even more tired than Walker felt. "Jim, our long-range scouts just reported in. The Dominion fleet isn't just being led by any commander. The Supreme Commander himself is heading this operation. His flagship has been confirmed among the approaching forces. Walker's jaw tightened. The Supreme Commander was notorious for his hatred of humanity, viewing them as uppity primitives who needed to be taught their place in the galaxy. He'd personally overseen the destruction of Mars colony, broadcasting the deaths of 2 million colonists as a warning to Earth. Understood, Admiral. Request permission to engage the Supreme Commander's group directly once the resonance cascade is ready. Stone's expression was grim. Granted. But Jim, if this doesn't work, if the Defiant falls, I'm ordering the rest of the fleet to make a run for deep space. We'll scatter to the stars, preserve what's left of our species. It won't come to that, Walker said with more confidence than he felt. The Defiant will prove what humanity is capable of. We'll show them that underestimating us was their biggest mistake. The Admiral nodded slowly. Good hunting, Captain. Stone out. Walker turned back to his crew, seeing the same mix of fear and determination on every face. They'd all lost someone to the Dominion. Friends, family, entire communities, gone because an alien empire decided humanity didn't deserve to exist among the stars. All hands, this is the Captain, he announced shipwide. In less than an hour, we'll engage the largest Dominion fleet ever assembled. They think they know what we're capable of. They think they can predict our every move. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show them that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our numbers. It's our ability to do the impossible when our backs are against the wall. He paused, watching Jupiter's massive form fill more of their viewport. Every human who has fallen to the Dominion, every colony they've burned, every life they've taken, it all comes down to this moment. We carry humanity's hopes with us. Remember that. Walker out. The bridge fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by something stronger. Purpose. Contact. Jones called out suddenly. Multiple Dominion warships entering detection range. They're moving to surround our position. Walker smiled grimly. Let them come. Let them think they had the Defiant trapped against Jupiter's gravity well. They didn't understand what humanity had achieved, how their relentless attacks had pushed human innovation to heights never before imagined. Chief Miller, he called over the comm. Time's up. Is the resonance cascade ready? Not quite, came the reply, accompanied by the sound of frantic activity. But it's as ready as it's going to be. We'll have one shot at this, Captain. If the calculations are wrong. They're not wrong, Walker said firmly. Because they can't be. All hands. Battle stations. Humanity's future begins now. The Defiant's engines hummed to life, her revolutionary design allowing her to move in ways that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Above them, the first wave of Dominion warships began their attack run, their purple-tinted shields glowing with deadly promise. The final battle for humanity's survival was about to begin, and one human warship was about to change everything. Deep in the engineering section of the HSS Defiant, Chief Engineer Tom Miller wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the pulsing core of the resonance cascade system. The experimental weapon looked deceptively simple, a sphere of crystalline material surrounded by rings of spinning quantum sensors, but its simplicity was an illusion. Inside that sphere, laws of physics were being bent in ways that would have seemed impossible just 3 years ago. Chief, called out one of his engineers, pointing to a screen filled with rapidly changing numbers. The containment field is fluctuating again. We're seeing microfractures in the quantum matrix. Miller rushed to the console, his experienced eyes scanning the data streams. The Dominion's attack on Mars had killed his wife and daughter, but it had also given humanity its first real look at their shield technology. The aliens used quantum fields to create their supposedly impenetrable defenses. Now, humanity would use that same science against them. Reroute power from secondary systems, Miller ordered, his fingers flying across the control panel. And get me a direct line to the bridge. Captain needs to know what we're dealing with. The ship shuddered as the first wave of Dominion weapons fire struck their shields. The Defiant's revolutionary design absorbed the impact better than any previous human vessel, but they couldn't take sustained fire for long. "Bridge, this is engineering," Miller called out. "Captain, we've got a problem. The resonance cascade is stable, but barely. Using it at anything less than optimal power could tear us apart." On the bridge, Captain Walker gripped his command chair as another blast rocked the ship. Through the main viewport, he could see dozens of Dominion warships moving into attack position. Their purple-tinted shields created an ethereal glow against Jupiter's swirling storms. "Define tear us apart, Chief," Walker replied, keeping his voice steady for the crew's benefit. "Are we talking about damage or complete destruction?" "Complete molecular dissociation," Miller answered grimly. "The quantum fields we're generating. They're like nothing we've ever seen. One wrong move and we'll create a cascade failure that'll make an antimatter explosion look like a firecracker." Walker absorbed this information as he watched more Dominion ships appear from hyperspace. They were taking no chances, committing overwhelming force to destroy the Defiant before she could use her mysterious new weapon. "Lieutenant Reed," Walker called to his tactical officer, "bring us about. Plot a course between those two heavy cruisers. Let's show them what this ship can do." The Defiant moved with impossible grace for a vessel her size. The inertial dampeners Miller had designed allowed maneuvers that Dominion tactical computers classified as physically impossible. They expected human ships to move like lumbering beasts. The Defiant danced. "Multiple targeting locks," Jones shouted from his sensor station. "They're coordinating their fire." "Evasive pattern Delta," Walker ordered. "Chief Miller, what do you need to get that weapon ready?" "Time and power," Miller replied through gritted teeth. "The quantum matrix needs to be perfectly aligned. Rush it, and we'll have more than just the Dominion to worry about." The ship's AI displayed possible escape routes on the tactical screen, but Walker saw they were running out of options. The Dominion was hurting them, using their superior numbers to force the Defiant into a vulnerable position. Suddenly, a new signal caught everyone's attention. A massive ship dropped out of hyperspace, easily 3 times the size of a standard Dominion cruiser. Its hull was decorated with intricate patterns of pulsing light, marking it as the Supreme Commander's flagship. "All hands, brace for impact," Walker shouted as the flagship's main weapon charged up. The beam that struck the Defiant was more powerful than anything they'd encountered before. Shields flared bright enough to blind the bridge crew momentarily. "Shields at 40%, Rogers reported, her fingers dancing across her console to reroute emergency power. "One more hit like that, and we're done." In engineering, Miller watched in horror as the quantum matrix began to destabilize. The massive energy surge from the hit had affected the delicate calibrations they'd spent hours perfecting. But as he studied the readings, something caught his eye. "Captain," he called out, excitement creeping into his voice. "That hit, it showed us something. The frequency of their main weapon. It's operating on the same quantum principles as their shields. If we can match that frequency," Walker understood immediately, "we can use their own weapon's energy to power the resonance cascade." "Exactly," Miller confirmed. "But we'll need to get hit again, and this time we need to be ready for it. I'm going to modify the shield harmonics to channel the energy directly into the quantum matrix." It was an insane plan. The kind of desperate gamble that only humans would attempt. Any other species would consider it suicide to deliberately take a hit from the most powerful weapon in the Dominion fleet. "How close do we need to be?" Walker asked, already formulating a plan. "Point-blank range," Miller replied. "Their weapon's energy disperses over distance. We need to take the hit at less than 10 kilometers to capture enough power." Walker looked at his bridge crew. They didn't need to speak. Every human on board knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never submit, never accept defeat, even in the face of impossible odds. "All hands," Walker announced shipwide. Prepare for close-quarters combat. Chief Miller, you'll get your power source. Lieutenant Reed, plot a direct course for the Supreme Commander's flagship. Let's introduce ourselves properly. The Defiant's engines roared to life, pushing the ship straight toward the massive alien vessel. Dominion ships scrambled to intercept, but the human warship's superior maneuverability allowed it to slip through their formation. They're charging their main weapon, Jones reported, his voice tense but controlled. Hold course, Walker ordered. Chief Miller, status of the quantum matrix. Recalibrated and ready, Miller replied. But Captain, if this doesn't work. It'll work, Walker cut him off. Because it has to. All hands, brace for impact in 3, 2, 1. The Supreme Commander's flagship fired, its beam of concentrated energy striking the Defiant head-on. The human warship's shields flared brilliantly, channeling the massive surge of power directly into the experimental weapon systems. In engineering, Miller watched in awe as the quantum matrix stabilized, powered by the very weapon meant to destroy them. The crystalline sphere at the heart of the resonance cascade began to pulse with an otherworldly light. Energy capture successful, he shouted over the comm. Quantum matrix is charged and stable. Captain, we're ready. On the bridge, Walker allowed himself a small smile. The Dominion had just given them exactly what they needed. Now it was time to show them humanity's response. All power to the resonance cascade, he ordered. Let's show them what happens when they push humanity too far. The experimental weapon began to power up, its energy readings climbing past anything human instruments were designed to measure. The fate of Earth, of all humanity, now rested on what would happen in the next few seconds. The space between the Defiant and the Supreme Commander's flagship crackled with energy. Lightning-like tendrils of quantum energy danced across the human warship's hull as the resonance cascade system reached full power. The weapon's distinctive hum echoed through every deck, a sound unlike anything ever heard on a human vessel before. Energy levels are off the charts, Miller reported from engineering, his voice tight with tension. The containment fields are holding, but just barely. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Walker watched as more Dominion ships moved to surround them. They were trapped between Jupiter's swirling storms below and the alien Armada above. But for the first time since the war began, he saw something new in the Dominion's tactics. Hesitation. They're afraid, Lieutenant Reed said, voicing what everyone on the bridge had noticed. Look at their formation. They're keeping their distance. A harsh laugh echoed through the bridge speakers. It took everyone a moment to realize it was coming from the main communication channel. The Supreme Commander himself was hailing them. Brave little humans, the alien's voice dripped with contempt, translated by the ship's computers. Always so creative in your final moments. Did you think we wouldn't notice the energy readings from your vessel? Whatever weapon you've built, it cannot save you now. Walker signaled for the channel to be muted. Chief Miller, what's the status of the quantum field? It's stable, but different from our simulations, Miller replied. The energy we absorbed from their weapon. It's creating patterns we've never seen before. The quantum resonance is spreading faster than we predicted. Before Walker could respond, the ship's sensors blared a warning. The Dominion fleet was powering up their weapons. Not just the flagship this time. Every ship within range was preparing to fire. They're not taking chances anymore, Jones called from his station. Reading multiple targeting locks. They're going to hit us with everything they have. Walker's mind raced. The resonance cascade was ready, but they hadn't planned for this scenario. Their original strategy called for targeting the Supreme Commander's flagship first, using it as a proof of concept. But with the entire fleet preparing to fire. Chief Miller, he called out suddenly. The quantum resonance you mentioned, could it affect multiple ships at once? There was a pause as Miller ran the calculations. Theoretically, yes, the field would propagate through their shield frequencies. But Captain, we've never tested it at this scale. The energy requirements would be met by their own weapons, Walker finished. Just like before. but multiplied. Jones, how many ships are charging weapons? 217, sir. All within a 50,000-kilometer radius. Walker smiled. The Dominion's greatest strength, their overwhelming numbers and firepower, was about to become their greatest weakness. Chief Miller, prepare to channel all incoming energy directly into the resonance cascade. Lieutenant Reed, rotate our shield harmonics to match the frequency we recorded from their last attack. Sir. Reed looked uncertain. That would weaken our shields against their weapons. Exactly, Walker replied. We're not going to defend against their attack. We're going to absorb it. Understanding dawned on the bridge crew's faces. It was the kind of plan that made humans unique among the galaxy's species, using an enemy's strength against them in ways they'd never expect. The Supreme Commander's voice crackled through the speakers again. Your silence speaks volumes, humans. Know that your defeat will be remembered as the moment when your species finally learned its place in the universe. Walker reopened the channel. Actually, we were just doing some final calculations. But you're right about one thing. This moment will be remembered, just not the way you think. He closed the channel before the alien could respond. All hands braced for multiple impacts. Chief Miller, on my mark, activate the resonance cascade. Time seemed to slow as hundreds of energy weapons powered up across the Dominion fleet. Their purple-tinted shields pulsed in sync, creating a stunning display against the backdrop of Jupiter's storms. Enemy weapons at 90% charge, Jones reported. Hold position, Walker ordered. They needed the aliens to commit fully to their attack. 95%. In engineering, Miller's hands hovered over the resonance cascade controls. The quantum matrix was humming louder now, as if sensing what was coming. All ships, weapons locked. Steady. Walker gripped his chair as the Dominion fleet prepared to fire. Everything hinged on this moment. The space around the Defiant lit up as hundreds of energy beams struck simultaneously. The ship's shields flared brilliantly, absorbing rather than deflecting the massive energy surge. Warning alarms blared throughout the vessel as systems were pushed far beyond their designed limits. Now, Chief Miller, activate the cascade. Miller slammed his hand down on the activation panel. The crystalline sphere at the heart of the weapon pulsed once, twice, and then released a wave of quantum energy unlike anything ever seen in human space. The wave spread outward at near-light speed, invisible except where it intersected with Dominion shields. There, it created a spectacular reaction. The aliens' purple barrier fields flickered, destabilized, and then collapsed completely as the quantum resonance disrupted their fundamental structure. It's working, Jones shouted, his professional demeanor cracking with excitement. Dominion shields are failing across the entire fleet. On the bridge of his flagship, the Supreme Commander watched in horror as his fleet's impenetrable defenses evaporated. The impossible had happened. The primitives had found a way to turn his own technology against him. The wave continued to spread, touching ship after ship. Without their shields, the Dominion vessels were far more vulnerable than human ships. They'd relied so heavily on their superior defenses that their hull armor was relatively light. Send word to Admiral Stone, Walker ordered. Tell the fleet to target any ship that's lost its shields. Focus on their engine sections first. The human fleet, which had been holding position at the edge of the battle, now surged forward. What had seemed like a hopeless last stand was transforming into humanity's first real chance at victory. Captain, Miller's voice came through the comm. The quantum matrix is still stable. We can fire again if needed. Walker looked at his tactical display. The Dominion fleet was in chaos. Ships were trying to retreat, but their formation had been too tight. They were colliding with each other in their panic to escape. Belay that, Chief, he replied. Save the power. I think we've made our point. The Supreme Commander's voice came through the comm one final time. But now the arrogance was gone. What? What have you done? We did exactly what humans always do, Walker answered calmly. We looked at something impossible, and then we found a way to do it anyway. Now shall we discuss the terms of your surrender? The battle wasn't over yet. Many Dominion ships still had weapons, and they were far from defenseless. But everything had changed. The myth of their invincibility had been shattered, and every ship in their fleet now knew that humanity had found a way to strip away their greatest advantage. The human warship that changed everything had lived up to its name. Now the real war could begin, not as predator versus prey, but as equals. The battle above Jupiter had transformed into something no one had ever seen before. Dominion ships, their once impenetrable shields stripped away, scattered in disarray. The human fleet pressed their advantage, but Walker knew the enemy was far from beaten. Cornered animals were often the most dangerous, and the Dominion fleet still outnumbered them greatly. Multiple energy spikes. Jones called from his sensor station. The Dominion ships are reconfiguring their weapons. They're increasing power output to compensate for lost shields. Through the Defiance viewport, Walker watched as the alien vessels began to regroup. The Supreme Commander's flagship remained at the center of their formation, but now smaller ships moved to surround it protectively. Without their shields, they would use their own ships as armor. Chief Miller, Walker called to engineering. Status of the resonance cascade. The system's stable, but cooling down, Miller replied between deep breaths. That pulse took more out of us than expected. We'll need at least 30 minutes before we can fire again. Walker nodded grimly. 30 minutes was an eternity in space combat. The Dominion wouldn't give them that much time. Already, their fleet was adopting new tactics, breaking into smaller groups that would be harder to hit with a single pulse. Captain, Lieutenant Rogers spoke up from her station. Admiral Stone is requesting instructions for the fleet. The Dominion ships are vulnerable, but they still have superior numbers and firepower. Before Walker could respond, the ship's sensors detected new movement. The Dominion fleet was launching fighters, thousands of them. Without their capital ship's shields to worry about, they could commit fully to an aggressive assault. They're changing tactics, Reed observed from tactical. Small, fast attacks from multiple directions. They're hoping to overwhelm us before we can fire the cascade again. Walker studied the tactical display, watching the swarm of enemy fighters approach. The Dominion was adapting faster than expected, turning what should have been their moment of triumph into a desperate race against time. Send word to the fleet, he ordered. Form defensive clusters. Use our point defense systems to cover each other. And get me Chief Miller again. The engineer's voice came through moments later, sounding exhausted but determined. Go ahead, Captain. Tom, I need options. The Dominion is switching to fighter swarms. Even without shields, they have enough ships to wear us down. Can we modify the resonance cascade for a shorter range, faster firing configuration? There was a pause filled with the sound of rapid typing. Maybe, Miller replied slowly. The quantum matrix is designed to generate a massive, expanding field. But if we narrow the focus, reduce the area of effect, we might be able to create something like a pulse cannon instead of a wave. How long? 20 minutes to reconfigure the emitters. But Captain, it would be much less powerful. We'd only affect ships within a few kilometers. Walker watched as the first wave of Dominion fighters began their attack run. Point defense lasers from the human fleet lit up space, destroying dozens of the smaller craft, but more kept coming. Do it, he ordered. We need something to even the odds. Lieutenant Reed, bring us about. We're going to show them that humans know how to adapt too. The Defiant turned gracefully, its advanced engines allowing maneuvers that other ships couldn't match. The human fleet moved with practiced precision, forming interlocking fields of fire that caught many fighters in deadly crossfire. But the Dominion had numbers on their side. For every fighter destroyed, 2 more took its place, and behind them, the larger ships were regrouping, preparing for a coordinated strike. Chief Miller reports the weapon modifications are at 40%, Rogers announced. But the Dominion fleet is moving to surround us. Heat signatures indicate they're charging weapons. The Supreme Commander's voice crackled through the comm system again. An impressive trick, humans, but not impressive enough. You've shown us your greatest weapon, and now we will show you why the Dominion has ruled space for 1,000 years. The alien fleet opened fire. Without their shields, they compensated with pure firepower. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes filled space, forcing the human ships into evasive maneuvers that broke up their defensive formation. Hull breach on Deck 4. Jones shouted as a shot struck home. Emergency force fields holding, but our armor won't take much more of this. Walker gripped his chair as another blast rocked the ship. The Defiant's revolutionary design was tough, but they were taking hits from dozens of ships at once. Around them, other human vessels were falling back, their hulls scared and burning from multiple impacts. 15 minutes to weapon reconfiguration, Rogers reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. We don't have 15 minutes, Reed responded, hands flying over his tactical console. The fighter swarms are pressing in from all sides. Our point defense grid is overloading. Walker watched as a human cruiser exploded under concentrated fire, its crew escaping in pods that the Dominion fighters casually destroyed. The sight sparked something in him, not just anger, but clarity. All power to engines, he ordered suddenly. Plot a course directly for the Supreme Commander's flagship. His bridge crew stared at him for a moment before understanding dawned. Without shields, the Dominion capital ships were relying on their fighters for protection, which meant they'll have to break off their attack to avoid hitting their own command ship. Reed finished the thought, already adjusting their course. The Defiant surged forward, its powerful engines pushing it through the swarm of fighters. As predicted, the smaller craft scattered to avoid collision with their flagship, creating a momentary gap in their attack. Chief Miller, Walker called out. Status. 10 more minutes. Miller shouted back over the sound of sparking electronics. The quantum matrix is realigning, but we're pushing the systems beyond safety limits. The Dominion isn't going to give us 10 minutes, Walker replied. We need that weapon now. Divert all non-essential power. Shut down everything we don't absolutely need. In engineering, Miller and his team worked frantically, pushing the experimental weapons systems to their absolute limit. Warning lights flashed across every console as they bypassed safety protocols and redlined power systems. The Defiant shuddered as more hits found their mark. Hull plating buckled, internal systems sparked and failed, but still they pressed on toward the Supreme Commander's massive vessel. 5 kilometers to target, Reed announced. The flagship is powering up its main gun. Chief Miller, Walker asked one final time. Not ready. Miller's voice was strained. The matrix isn't stable. If we fire now. If we don't fire, we're dead anyway. Walker cut him off. Do it, Chief. Trust in human engineering. Miller hesitated for just a moment, then slammed his hand down on the activation panel. The resonance cascade system hummed to life, but the sound was different now, higher pitched, almost screaming. The modified weapon fired, releasing not a wave, but a concentrated beam of quantum energy. It struck the Supreme Commander's flagship dead center, the focused power of the cascade tearing through the unshielded hull like paper. Secondary explosions rippled along the massive vessel's length as its power systems overloaded. The Dominion fighters broke formation, suddenly directionless without their command ship's guidance. But aboard the Defiant, celebrations would have to wait. The modified cascade had taken its toll on the ship's systems. Alarms blared throughout every deck as power fluctuations cascaded through the grid. Multiple system failures, Rogers reported. The quantum matrix is going critical. Walker looked out at the chaos they'd created. The burning Dominion flagship, the scattered fighter squadrons, the human fleet regrouping for another attack. They'd changed the course of the war, but at what cost? All hands, he announced shipwide. Brace for impact. This isn't over yet. The Defiant hung in space above Jupiter, its hull scared and burning from dozens of direct hits. Warning sirens blared through every deck as the modified resonance cascade system threatened to tear itself apart. But none of that mattered to the crew watching the Supreme Commander's flagship break apart, secondary explosions rippling along its length. Power systems critical. Miller's voice cracked through the comm. The quantum matrix is destabilizing. We need to shut it down now. Walker gripped his command chair as another tremor ran through the ship. Around them, the remains of the Dominion fleet hung in disarray, their fighters flying in confused patterns without central coordination. But he knew this moment of chaos wouldn't last long. "Status of the Supreme Commander's ship," he demanded. Jones worked his sensor console frantically. "Their main power core is going critical. Reading multiple escape pods launching. Sir, I'm detecting the Supreme Commander's personal transport among them." Walker leaned forward. The architect of humanity's near extinction was trying to escape. Part of him wanted to order the Defiant to pursue, to end this here and now. But another explosion rocked the ship, making the decision for him. Chief Miller, shut down the Cascade. All power to structural integrity and life support. Lieutenant Reed, get us clear of the flagship's blast radius. The Defiant's engines flared as they pulled away from the dying alien vessel. Behind them, the Supreme Commander's flagship finally succumbed to its wounds, exploding in a spectacular display that briefly rivaled Jupiter's brightness. "The blast is causing a chain reaction in the quantum fields," Miller reported. "It's affecting all nearby Dominion ships that were exposed to the Cascade." Through the viewport, Walker watched as ship after ship lost power, their systems overloaded by the quantum backwash from their commander's destruction. What had started as a desperate gamble had turned into a devastating blow against the supposedly invincible Dominion fleet. "Sir," Rogers called out, "incoming transmission from Admiral Stone. The remaining Dominion capital ships are retreating. Their fighter screen is withdrawing to cover their escape." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, but Walker raised his hand for silence. "Chief Miller, what's the status of our ship?" There was a long pause before the engineer replied. "Not good, Captain. The modified Cascade burned out most of our power conduits. We're running on emergency systems, and those won't last long. But, sir, you need to see these readings. The quantum field effects we created, they're still spreading." Walker frowned. "Spreading how?" "It's like a ripple in space-time," Miller explained, his voice filled with wonder despite their situation. "The Cascade didn't just disable their shields. It created a persistent effect that's propagating through subspace. Any Dominion ship that tries to raise shields within this region of space will have them fail immediately." The implications hit Walker like a physical blow. They hadn't just won a battle. They'd created a weapon that could deny the Dominion their greatest advantage across an entire sector of space. "Admiral Stone is requesting all ships report in," Rogers announced. "The human fleet took heavy losses, but we're still combat effective. 16 ships reporting major damage, 12 destroyed." Walker closed his eyes briefly, honoring the sacrifices made. When he opened them, his voice was firm. "Send word to the fleet. The Dominion will be back, and in greater numbers. But now, they know we can hurt them. More importantly, they know we can adapt." The next few hours passed in a blur of damage control and rescue operations. The human fleet worked together to recover escape pods and salvage what they could from the battlefield. The Defiant, despite its critical condition, became a symbol of hope as news of its achievement spread through the surviving ships. 3 days later, Walker stood in a hastily assembled conference room on Europa Base, Earth's last remaining outpost in the Jupiter system. Admiral Stone and the other fleet commanders had gathered to discuss the battle's implications. "The resonance cascade effect is still expanding," Miller explained to the assembled officers, his uniform wrinkled from endless hours of analysis. "Our best estimates suggest it will cover the entire Jupiter system within a week. Any Dominion ship that enters the affected space will be unable to raise shields." "And can they counter it?" one of the commanders asked. Miller shook his head. "Not quickly. The quantum principles we uncovered, they're fundamental to how their shield technology works. They'd need to completely redesign their defense systems from the ground up." Admiral Stone stood slowly, his aged face showing both exhaustion and determination. Then we press our advantage. The Defiant has shown us the way forward. Every ship in the fleet will be fitted with a resonance cascade system as soon as possible. Sir, Walker interjected, the Defiant systems were experimental, dangerous. We nearly lost the ship. Then we'll improve them, Stone replied firmly. That's what humans do, isn't it? We learn, we adapt, we overcome. The Dominion thought they had us beaten, but they didn't understand what they were really fighting. He walked to the viewport, staring out at Jupiter's massive form. They saw us as primitives playing with technology we didn't understand. But they forgot something crucial. Sometimes not knowing something is impossible is the first step to making it possible. The room fell silent as his words sank in. Every person there had lost friends, family, entire worlds to the Dominion's aggression. But now, for the first time, they had hope. The Supreme Commander escaped, Walker reminded them. He'll return with an even larger fleet. Let him come, Stone said, turning back to face them. When he does, he'll find more than one human ship waiting for him. The Defiant showed us the way. Now it's time to show the galaxy what humanity can really do. As the meeting concluded, Walker found himself back on the Defiant's bridge. The ship was still undergoing repairs, its systems being rebuilt better and stronger than before. Engineers from across the fleet swarmed through its corridors, studying every aspect of the revolutionary design that had changed the course of the war. Captain, Miller called from the doorway. The first set of improvements to the Cascade system are ready for review. We think we can increase its range by 40% while reducing power consumption. Walker smiled. Already they were improving on the original design, making it more efficient, more effective. That was humanity's true strength, not just creating something new, but constantly making it better. Get to work, Chief, he ordered. The Dominion will be back, and I want the Defiant ready to show them something new when they arrive. As Miller left, Walker looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Supreme Commander was gathering his forces, planning his revenge. But things would be different next time. The human warship that changed everything had done more than win a battle. It had given humanity back its future. The war wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But now the Dominion would face an enemy they had never truly understood. Humans who knew they could win. The old ship groaned as it pushed through the darkness of space. Its hull, marked with patches of newer metal among the old, told stories of countless repairs. The HMS Steadfast was far from the gleaming vessels that made up the rest of the Terran fleet. While other ships boasted smooth lines and glowing energy weapons, the Steadfast still carried traditional railguns and ballistic weaponry that most considered outdated. Captain Thomas Reed stood at the bridge window, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the stars drift by. 25 years of service had left streaks of gray in his dark hair, but his eyes remained sharp as they scanned the sector his ship was assigned to patrol. It was quiet out here, far from the front lines where humanity fought against the Bright Horizon Collective. That's all his ship was good for these days. Patrol duty in empty space. Another thrilling day in the back end of nowhere. Weapons Officer James Cooper said from his station, his voice carrying a hint of frustration. He was young, barely 30, and Reed could sense his officer's desire for action. Quiet is good, Reed replied, turning to face his bridge crew. Quiet means our colonists are safe. He walked over to Cooper's station, glancing at the sensor readings. All clear, as usual. The captain had learned to appreciate these peaceful moments, especially with the war going badly for humanity in other sectors. The ship's intercom crackled to life. Engineering to bridge. Maria Wells' voice was calm, but carried an edge of concern that made Reed straighten up. Captain, I need you down here. There's something you should see. Reed exchanged glances with Cooper before heading to the lift. Keep our eyes sharp up here, he ordered as the doors closed. The trip down to engineering was quick, but Reed felt every vibration, every small shudder of his aging ship. He knew the Steadfast's every sound. every quirk, like a writer knows their voice. Engineering was a maze of pipes, conduits, and machinery that looked more at home in a museum than a warship. Wells stood at her main console, her dark hair tied back messily as she pored over readouts. Unlike the sleek holographic displays on modern ships, the Steadfast still used physical screens and buttons. She looked up as Reed approached. "Captain, remember those power fluctuations we've been tracking in the main railgun systems?" Wells pulled up a diagram on her screen. "I think I know what's causing them. And it's not what we thought." Reed leaned in to study the display. Unlike most of his crew, who saw the Steadfast's old technology as a burden, Wells had always shown genuine interest in understanding how everything worked. "Show me," he said. "The fluctuations aren't a malfunction," Wells explained, her fingers dancing across the controls. "They're a harmonic resonance created by the interaction between our railgun's magnetic field and the new quantum shielding systems installed during our last refit." She pulled up another screen showing wave patterns. "Look at these frequencies." Reed studied the patterns, but engineering wasn't his specialty. "What am I looking at, Wells?" "Our railguns are creating quantum interference patterns," she said, excitement creeping into her voice. "The same kind of patterns that the Bright Horizons ships use in their shield systems. Captain, I think our obsolete weapons might actually be able to affect their defenses in ways their engineers never considered." Before Reed could respond, the ship's alert system activated. Cooper's voice came through the intercom. "Captain, to the bridge. We got company." Reed and Wells shared a look before he hurried back to the lift. When he reached the bridge, Cooper was already pulling up sensor data. "Bright Horizon patrol ship," Cooper reported. "Light cruiser class. They're staying just outside standard sensor range." "They're testing our response," Reed said, settling into his command chair. "Standard patrol pattern. Let's not give them anything unusual to report." The bridge crew worked efficiently, maintaining their course while keeping tabs on the alien vessel. The Bright Horizon ship was beautiful in a deadly way, all smooth curves and glowing energy nodes. Next to it, the Steadfast must have looked like space debris. "They're scanning us," Cooper reported, getting a lot of attention for an obsolete patrol ship. Reed watched the alien vessel on the main screen. "They're probably wondering why we're still using a ship this old," he said with a slight smile. "Let them think we're harmless. Pride comes before the fall." Hours passed as the two ships maintained their distance. The Bright Horizon cruiser eventually departed, apparently satisfied that the old human vessel posed no threat. Only then did Reed allow himself to relax slightly. "Cooper, I want you to work with Wells on something," Reed said after the alien ship was gone. "She's found an interesting quirk in our weapon systems. Could be nothing, but I want it investigated." "Sir," Cooper looked confused. "Our weapon systems are ancient. What could possibly be interesting about them?" Reed smiled. "Sometimes the old ways have advantages we've forgotten. And right now, we need every advantage we can get." He turned to face his weapons officer fully. "The Bright Horizon thinks they know everything about us. They see our older technology and dismiss it. That's their weakness." Later that night, Reed sat in his quarters, reviewing Wells' initial findings. The engineering officer had already compiled an impressive amount of data on the harmonic interactions she discovered. If she was right, the Steadfast's railguns might be capable of something revolutionary. He pulled up the latest fleet reports on his tablet. The news wasn't good. The Bright Horizon was pushing further into human space every day, their advanced shields making them nearly invulnerable to modern energy weapons. The Terran fleet's newest ships, for all their technological advancement, were struggling to make a dent in the alien defenses. Reed looked out his small window at the stars beyond. The Steadfast had been his home for 5 years now. Ever since the Admiralty had decided he was better suited to quiet patrol duty than frontline command. They'd given him an old ship because they thought both he and the vessel were past their prime. But Reed knew better. He'd served through 3 wars, commanded 6 ships, and learned one crucial lesson. It's not the shine of the weapon that matters, but the wisdom to know how to use it. The Steadfast might be old, but age brought with it experience and hidden strengths. He opened a new message window and began composing a report to Fleet Command about Wells' discovery. He already knew what would happen. They would dismiss it as the desperate theories of a crew assigned to an obsolete ship, but he would document everything anyway. Someday they might need this information. As he wrote, the Steadfast continued its patrol through the quiet sector of space, its ancient engines humming steadily. To anyone watching, it was just another outdated ship assigned to a backwater post. But within its worn hull, something revolutionary was brewing, a discovery that would soon shake the very foundations of the war. Reed finished his report and sent it, knowing it would likely be filed away and forgotten. That was fine. Let them underestimate the Steadfast. Let them think its age made it weak. Soon enough, they would all learn what this old ship and her crew were truly capable of. 3 days had passed since Maria Wells' discovery, and she hadn't slept much since then. The engineering bay had become her second home, filled with scattered data pads and cold cups of coffee. James Cooper stood beside her, watching as she made another adjustment to the railgun's power settings. "Run the simulation again," Wells said, pushing her tired eyes. The computer churned through the calculations, its older processors working harder than their modern counterparts would have needed to. Cooper leaned in as the results appeared on the screen. "That's the third successful test," he said, unable to hide his excitement. "The frequency matching is perfect. These readings suggest we could disrupt their shield harmonics by at least 60%. Wells nodded, but kept typing. "The theory works in simulation, but we need real-world data. Without knowing the exact frequencies of their shield systems, we're just guessing." The ship's intercom buzzed. "Engineering, this is the captain. Status report." "Sir," Wells responded, "we've confirmed the theory in simulation. The railgun's magnetic field can be tuned to create destructive interference patterns in quantum shield systems. But," she hesitated, "we need more data on their actual shield frequencies to make it work." "Understood." Reed's voice carried a note of consideration. "Both of you, come to my ready room. Bring your findings." Minutes later, they sat across from Captain Reed as he reviewed their data. The ready room was small, like everything else on the Steadfast, but it felt comfortable, lived in. A model of the ship sat on Reed's desk, its paint slightly chipped. "So," Reed said, looking up from the reports, "we have a weapon that might work, but we need to scan their shields up close to get the right frequencies." "Yes, sir," Cooper answered. "We'd need to be within standard combat range, and we'd have to get them to power up their shields fully. The scan would take about 30 seconds. Reed leaned back in his chair. 30 seconds is a long time in a fight, especially against their technology. "Sir," Wells leaned forward, "I know it's risky, but this could change everything. Their quantum shields have made them nearly invincible against our energy weapons, but they've never had to defend against something like this. They don't even think about kinetic weapons anymore." A message alert flashed on Reed's desk screen. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. "Fleet Command responded to our report," he said. "They're not interested in pursuing the theory. They say we should focus on our patrol duties and leave weapons development to the research division." Wells felt her heart sink, but Cooper spoke up. "With all due respect to Fleet Command, sir, they're wrong. We've proved the concept works. We just need a chance to test it." Reed stood and walked to his window, watching the stars streak by. "The problem is, Fleet Command thinks the future is in energy weapons. They've invested everything in trying to overpower the Bright Horizons shields. The idea that an old railgun might do what their newest weapons can't. It doesn't fit their worldview." The ship suddenly shuddered slightly, and a moment later, the alert system activated. "Bridge to Captain." The watch officer's voice came through. "We're picking up unusual energy readings from the nearby asteroid field." All three of them hurried to the bridge. The main screen showed a cluster of asteroids about 50,000 kilometers away, with strange energy fluctuations appearing between the rocks. Analysis? Reed asked, settling into his command chair. It looks like some kind of cloaking field failing, Cooper said from his station. Sir, I think someone's been watching us. As if on cue, a Bright Horizon scout ship shimmered into view, its cloaking device malfunctioning. The alien vessel was smaller than the cruiser they'd seen days ago, but still deadly. They must have been monitoring our tests, Wells said quietly. Reed's voice remained calm. Battle stations. Power up weapons, but do not target them yet. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, even as old systems whirred to life around them. The scout ship, perhaps realizing it had been spotted, began moving toward them. Its sleek form seemed to mock the Steadfast's aged appearance. They're scanning us, Cooper reported. Getting the same readings as before. They're focusing on our weapon systems. Reed nodded slowly. They saw our tests. They're trying to figure out what we were doing. He turned to Wells. How long would you need to get good readings of their shield frequencies? 30 seconds, sir, but they'd have to have their shields at full power. A small smile crossed Reed's face. Cooper, load the railguns with practice rounds. Power them up to full, but keep them slightly out of alignment with Wells' modifications. Sir, Cooper looked confused. They want to know what we're up to. Let's give them a show. Make it look like we're having trouble with our weapons, like we can't quite get them working right. Understanding dawned on Wells' face. We let them think we're struggling with malfunctioning equipment, and they'll stick around to gather intelligence. Reed finished. Their pride won't let them pass up a chance to study what they think is a failed experiment. The next 20 minutes were tense. The Steadfast made a show of powering up its railguns, then powering them down, as if running tests. The Bright Horizon scout ship moved closer, its own shields raised as it observed. They're at optimal scanning range, Wells reported from her jerry-rigged scanning station. Their shields are at full power. They're taking no chances with us. Cooper, Reed said quietly, on my mark, I want you to fire a single practice round. Make it look like an accident. Wells, be ready with your scans. The bridge crew held their breath. The scout ship hovered nearby, its sensors probing the Steadfast's systems. Now, Reed ordered. Cooper fired. The practice round, harmless though it was, streaked toward the alien ship. As expected, they easily deflected it with their shields. Scans coming in, Wells said excitedly. Their shield frequencies are clear as day. They're exactly where we thought they'd be in the quantum spectrum. Sir, we were right. The alien ship, apparently satisfied that the Steadfast's weapons were no threat, began to turn away. They transmitted a message in the common trade language. Your weapons malfunction is noted. Recommend immediate return to port for repairs. Reed waited until they were gone before allowing himself to smile. Wells, Cooper, how long will it take to calibrate our railguns to those frequencies? A few hours, sir, Wells answered. We'll need to adjust the magnetic coils precisely, but now we know exactly what we're aiming for. Get to work, Reed ordered, and keep it quiet. As far as anyone else is concerned, we're still having technical difficulties. He looked at the star chart where the scout ship had disappeared. They think they caught us testing a failed weapon. Their overconfidence is going to cost them dearly. As Wells and Cooper hurried back to engineering, Reed sent a final message to Fleet Command, officially reporting the weapons malfunction and requesting maintenance at their next port call. Let the Bright Horizon think they had nothing to fear from this old ship. Let them think the Steadfast was just another relic, struggling to keep its outdated weapons working. Soon enough, they would learn just how dangerous underestimating this ship and her crew could be. The real test was coming, and the Steadfast would be ready. The alarms blared through the Steadfast's corridors without warning. Captain Reed was in engineering, reviewing the latest adjustments to the railgun systems, when the call came from the bridge. Captain, emergency transmission from Fleet Command. The watch officer's voice was tight with tension. "The Bright Horizon has launched a major offensive. They've broken through our lines at Thompson's Gate." Reed was already moving, with Wells close behind him. They reached the bridge just as the tactical display updated, showing a massive fleet of enemy ships pushing through humanity's defensive line. The main screen filled with emergency broadcasts from civilian ships fleeing the attack. "How did they get past our early warning systems?" Cooper asked from his station, hands flying over the controls. "They didn't," Reed said grimly, studying the tactical display. "They went through them. Look at the debris fields." The screen showed the scattered remains of human sensor platforms and patrol ships. "They knew exactly where to hit us." "Sir," the communications officer called out, "I'm getting distress calls from the Palmer Colony evacuation fleet. They're trying to escape through our sector, but their escorts were pulled away to defend the main line." Reed's jaw tightened. The Palmer Colony held over 50,000 civilians. If the Bright Horizon fleet caught them, he turned to Wells. "Are the railgun modifications ready?" "Yes, sir. We've calibrated them to match the frequencies we recorded from the scout ship, but we haven't had a chance to test them in actual combat conditions." "Sir," Cooper's voice cut through the tension, "long-range sensors are picking up a large force of Bright Horizon ships. They're on an intercept course with the Palmer evacuation fleet. Time to intercept, 40 minutes. Reed stood at the center of his bridge, feeling the weight of command more heavily than ever before. The tactical display told a clear story. The Steadfast was the only military ship within range of the civilian fleet. Their orders were clear: patrol ships were to avoid engagement with major enemy forces and retreat to designated rally points. "How many ships in the enemy force?" Reed asked quietly. Cooper swallowed hard before answering. 15 vessels, sir. 2 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 5 escort ships. They're moving fast." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what those numbers meant. Even with their modified weapons, the Steadfast was just one aging destroyer going up against an Armada. "Sir," the communications officer spoke up, "Fleet Command is ordering all patrol ships to fall back to Defense Point Delta. They're writing off this sector." Reed walked to the main viewport, watching the stars. Behind those stars were 50,000 civilians running for their lives. He thought about Fleet Command, about their dismissal of Wells' discovery, about their focus on newer and flashier technology. "Plot an intercept course with the enemy fleet," Reed ordered. The bridge crew looked at him in shock. Cooper was the first to speak. "Sir, those orders." "I know what the orders say." Reed turned to face his crew. "I also know what's at stake. 50,000 civilians who won't stand a chance if we run." He looked at each of them in turn. "I won't order any of you to disobey a direct command. If you want to take a shuttle to the rally point, I'll understand." Wells stepped forward first. "My railgun modifications. My place is here." "The weapons don't work without a targeting system," Cooper added with a slight smile. "I'm staying." One by one, the bridge crew voiced their support. Reed felt a surge of pride in his people. This was why the old ships were special. Their crews learned to trust each other, to become family. "Plot a course that puts us between the enemy fleet and the civilian ships," Reed ordered. "Engineering. Divert all spare power to the railgun systems. Cooper, I want firing solutions ready the moment they come in range." The Steadfast's engines pushed to full power, its old frame shuddering with the effort. On the tactical display, the red dots of the enemy fleet grew closer. The blue dots of the civilian ships were moving as fast as they could, but they were slow, vulnerable. "Sir," Cooper reported, "enemy fleet is launching scout drones. They'll have visual contact in 5 minutes." "Let them look," Reed said. "Let them see exactly what's coming for them. An old ship with outdated weapons. Their pride won't let them turn away from such an easy target." Wells worked at her station, monitoring the railgun modifications. "Power levels are holding steady, sir. The frequency matching is perfect. If this works." When this works, Reed corrected her, we just have to hold them long enough for the civilian ships to escape. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. The enemy fleet grew larger on their screens, their sleek ships gleaming with deadly purpose. The Steadfast must have looked like space debris to them, a single ancient vessel daring to challenge their might. They're broadcasting, sir, the communications officer reported. They're ordering us to stand down or be destroyed. No response. Reed ordered. Let them think our communications are as outdated as everything else. He turned to his crew. This is the moment, people. Everything we've worked for comes down to the next few minutes. Whatever happens, I want you to know how proud I am of this crew. The first enemy shots would come soon. Reed could almost feel the Bright Horizon commanders' amusement at this lone, outdated ship challenging their fleet. They would expect an easy victory, a moment's diversion before continuing their pursuit of the civilian vessels. All hands, Reed's voice carried through the ship's intercom. Battle stations. This old girl has one more fight in her, and it's going to be one for the history books. The Steadfast's engines pushed harder, driving the ship toward its date with destiny. Behind them, 50,000 civilians prayed for a miracle. Ahead of them, an enemy fleet approached, confident in their superior technology and overwhelming numbers. They had no idea what was coming. The first shots from the Bright Horizon fleet lit up space like artificial stars. Their energy weapons were beautiful in a deadly way. The Steadfast's older engines growled as Reed ordered evasive maneuvers, avoiding the initial barrage. They're trying to bracket us, Cooper called out from his station. Standard containment pattern. They think we'll run. Reed allowed himself a small smile. That's their first mistake. Wells, are the railguns ready? Yes, sir. Frequency matching is locked in. We'll only get one chance at this. They'll adapt once they realize what we're doing. The enemy fleet spread out in a classic attack formation. Their two heavy cruisers held back, letting their destroyers move forward to deal with what they surely saw as a minor annoyance. The Steadfast must have looked pathetic to them, an ancient vessel with visible repair patches along its hull. Let them get closer, Reed ordered. Wait for my mark. His crew trusted him, holding their positions even as the enemy ships closed in. The first destroyer was now less than 10,000 kilometers away, its quantum shields glowing with confidence. Sir, the sensor officer reported, they're powering up their main weapons. All ships are bringing their shields to maximum power. Perfect, Reed said quietly. That's their second mistake. Cooper, target the nearest destroyer. Wells, initiate the frequency pulse. The Steadfast's railguns hummed to life, their magnetic coils spinning up to full power. The enemy destroyer's captain must have been surprised to see such an antiquated weapon system activating. Perhaps they were even laughing. Fire. The first shot streaked across space, a simple metal slug accelerated to incredible speed. The destroyer didn't even try to dodge, trusting its quantum shields to handle such primitive weaponry. Then the impossible happened. The projectile passed through the shield as if it wasn't there, its specially tuned magnetic field creating a perfect disruption in the quantum barrier. The slug slammed into the destroyer's hull, ripping through armor designed to deflect energy weapons, but vulnerable to good old-fashioned kinetic impact. Direct hit, Cooper shouted. Their shields are. They're completely down. The destroyer listed to one side. Emergency systems flaring. The rest of the enemy fleet seemed to pause in shock. Reed didn't give them time to recover. Target the next ship. Fire at will. The Steadfast's railguns roared again and again. Each shot was precisely calibrated to match the frequency of the enemy shields, each impact devastating. Two more destroyers fell before the Bright Horizon fleet realized the true danger they faced. They're changing formation, Cooper reported with grim satisfaction, breaking up their tight groups. They didn't expect to need point defense against ballistic weapons. The enemy fleet's confidence had turned to confusion. Their return fire became erratic as ship after ship found their supposedly impenetrable shields useless against the steadfast attacks. The old destroyer danced between their energy beams, its experienced crew using their ship's smaller size to their advantage. "The heavy cruisers are moving in," Wells warned. "They're adapting their shield frequencies." Reed nodded. As expected, Cooper switched to scattershot pattern. Wells began random frequency modulation. The Steadfast's next volley split into multiple projectiles, each tuned to a slightly different frequency. The heavy cruiser's shields caught some, but others slipped through, causing damage across their hulls. Not as devastating as direct hits, but enough to keep them off balance. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "the civilian ships report they're almost at the jump point. 10 more minutes." "Enemy destroyers regrouping," Cooper warned. "They're trying to flank us." Reed studied the tactical display. 4 enemy destroyers were already disabled or destroyed, but the remaining ships were adapting their tactics. They'd lost the advantage of surprise, and now the real test would begin. "Bring us about," Reed ordered. "Full power to forward shields. Wells, divert auxiliary power to the railgun cooling systems. We're going straight through their line." The Steadfast turned to face the enemy formation head-on. It was a move so aggressive, so seemingly suicidal, that it caught the Bright Horizon ships off guard. They'd expected the human vessel to keep trying to evade. "Multiple enemy locks," Cooper shouted. "Energy weapons charging." "Hold course," Reed commanded. The enemy fire came in a devastating wave, but Reed had counted on their anger, their wounded pride. Their shots were powerful but predictable. The Steadfast slipped through gaps in their fire, its old hull groaning with the strain of high-G maneuvers. "Port railgun ready," Wells reported. "Target the lead cruiser's command section," Reed ordered. "Fire when ready." The shot caught the cruiser's captain by surprise. They'd been so focused on hitting the Steadfast with their energy weapons that they'd let their shield frequencies stabilize. The railgun round punched through their weakened defenses and struck their bridge directly. The massive cruiser's lights flickered and died, its systems failing as emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout its hull. The second cruiser broke formation, trying to maintain distance from the seemingly primitive vessel that had just crippled its flagship. 5 minutes until the civilian ship's jump, communications reported. "Enemy fleet is falling back," Cooper added. They're retreating, sir." But Reed saw something in the tactical display that made his blood run cold. "No, they're not retreating. They're clearing the firing lane. All hands, brace for impact." The second cruiser had moved to a position where the Steadfast couldn't reach it with a direct shot. Its main gun, a massive energy weapon that ran the length of the ship, began to glow with gathered power. "Evasive maneuvers," Reed ordered, but he knew they couldn't dodge this shot. The cruiser had timed it perfectly, waiting until the Steadfast was committed to its attack run. "Impact in 3 seconds," Cooper shouted. "Divert all power to starboard shields." The energy beam struck the Steadfast like the fist of an angry god. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship as systems overloaded. On the bridge, displays exploded in showers of sparks. "Hull breach on decks 3 and 4, damage control reported. Emergency containment holding." Through the chaos, Wells' voice cut through. "Railguns still operational, sir. Cooling systems damaged, but functioning." Reed pulled himself back to his command chair, ignoring the blood running down his face from a cut caused by flying debris. "Cooper, do you have a firing solution on that cruiser?" "Yes, sir, but our shot will be weak without full power to the magnetic coils." "It doesn't need to be strong," Reed said. "It just needs to be precise. Wells, forget the cooling. Divert all remaining power to the coils. 1 shot. Make it count." The Steadfast's railgun fired one last time. The projectile seemed to move in slow motion across space, its magnetic field precisely tuned to the cruiser's shield frequency. The enemy captain must have felt safe at this range, must have thought their shields could handle any attack from this damaged relic. They were wrong. The shot pierced their shields and struck their main weapon array just as it was powering up for another blast. The resulting explosion ripped through the cruiser's hull, secondary detonations following as power conduits overloaded. Civilian ships entering jump point. Communications announced triumphantly, "They're away." The remaining enemy ships, seeing their cruisers destroyed and their prey escaped, began to withdraw. The Steadfast's bridge crew watched in exhausted amazement as the mighty Bright Horizon fleet retreated from their single ancient destroyer. "Damage report," Reed ordered, finally allowing himself to breathe normally again. "Hull breaches on multiple decks, shield generators at 20%, main power fluctuating," Wells reported. "But we're alive, sir. We're all alive." Reed looked at his tactical display, at the debris of 8 enemy ships floating in space around them. Not bad for an obsolete patrol ship. "Send a message to Fleet Command," he ordered. Tell them the Steadfast sends its regards. And we'll be needing those repairs after all." 2 weeks after the battle, the Steadfast limped into Victory Station's repair dock. Its hull bore new scars, patches of armor blackened and torn from enemy fire. But it moved under its own power, proud despite its wounds. As the docking clamps engage, a crowd had gathered in the observation deck. Word of the ship's impossible victory had spread through the fleet. Reed stood on his bridge, watching the repair crews swarm around his ship through the viewport. The last 2 weeks had been a blur of emergency repairs, debriefings, and endless questions from Fleet Command. Wells hadn't left engineering during the entire journey back, nursing their damaged systems along. "Captain," Cooper called from his station, "Admiral Thompson is requesting permission to come aboard." Reed straightened his uniform. "Grant permission. Have Wells meet us in the main conference room." The Admiral arrived with a full entourage of technical specialists and fleet officers. Reed noticed how they all stared at the Steadfast's old-style corridors, their eyes lingering on the exposed conduits and physical control panels. They weren't looking with dismissal anymore, but with curiosity. In the conference room, Wells had set up a detailed presentation of their weapon modifications. She stood proudly beside her diagrams and data readings, dark circles under her eyes, but her spine straight. The Admiral's technical team leaned forward as she explained the frequency matching technique. "Remarkable," Admiral Thompson said when she finished. "You turned the enemy's greatest strength into a weakness. Their reliance on quantum shields made them forget about basic physical defense." He turned to Reed. "The footage from your battle has been analyzed by every tactical officer in the fleet. 8 enemy ships destroyed, 2 heavy cruisers disabled, and 50,000 civilians saved." "The Steadfast is a good ship, sir," Reed replied simply. "She just needed a chance to prove it." "More than proved it," Thompson smiled. "Fleet Command has ordered an immediate review of all our older vessels. We're refitting the entire reserve fleet with modified railgun systems based on your designs." The Bright Horizons expansion has stalled as they scramble to adapt their defenses. Wells spoke up. "Sir, the frequency matching technique won't work forever. They'll develop countermeasures." "Of course they will," Thompson nodded. "But you've given us something more valuable than a single weapon. You've reminded us not to rely too heavily on any one technology. Sometimes the old ways are still useful." The Admiral's technical team wanted to begin detailed scans of the Steadfast's weapons immediately, but Thompson held up his hand. "First, there's something else." He pulled out a data pad. "New orders for the Steadfast and her crew." Reed took the pad, reading quickly. His eyes widened slightly. "The Steadfast is being reassigned to the front lines," Thompson explained. "We're forming a new tactical unit around her. 6 other ships of her class, all being refitted with your weapons. You'll be leading them, Captain." "Sir?" Reed looked up in surprise. "The Bright Horizon thinks they know everything about us," Thompson said. "They see our older ships and dismiss them as relics. Let's show them how dangerous that assumption can be. Your task force will strike at targets they think are safe, using weapons they think are obsolete. After the admiral left, Reed gathered his crew in the ship's mess hall. The room was crowded. Every member of the crew pressed in to hear their captain's words. They'd been through hell together, survived against impossible odds. "Fleet Command has given us new orders," Reed announced. "They want us hunting bigger game." A cheer went up from the crew. "But first, we're getting a full refit. New armor, improved power systems, and better targeting computers." "They're not taking out our old controls, are they?" someone called from the back. There was worry in the voice. The crew had grown to trust their familiar systems. "No," Reed smiled. "They want to study how we do things the old way. Apparently, we've started a trend. Sometimes the tried and true methods are still the best." "What about the railguns?" Cooper asked. "Are they replacing those?" "Actually," Wells spoke up, "they want me to supervise the installation of similar systems on other ships. But the Steadfast keeps her original guns. They're part of her soul now." The crew dispersed to their duties, morale higher than ever. Reed walked through his ship's corridors, running his hand along the worn walls. The repair crews would fix the battle damage, replace the burned-out systems, but they wouldn't change the Steadfast's essential nature. She would remain what she had always been, a warrior, tested by time and combat. A month later, the Steadfast led her new task force out of dock. 6 other ships of her class flew in formation with her, their hulls gleaming with fresh paint, but their hearts old and strong. Their railguns had been modified according to Wells' designs, their crews trained in the old ways of space combat. On the bridge, Reed watched his tactical display as the ships moved into attack formation. The Bright Horizon had grown cautious since their defeat, clustering their ships for protection, doubting their invincibility for the first time. "Task Force reports ready, sir," Cooper said from his station. Wells stood beside him, monitoring the weapons systems she'd helped design. "Send a message to all ships," Reed ordered. "Tell them, the old guard is back. Let's remind our enemies why they should fear what they don't understand." The Steadfast's engines powered up, pushing the ship toward its next battle. It didn't matter that newer, more advanced vessels filled the fleet. The old destroyer had found its place again, leading the way into combat, proving that sometimes the best weapons were the ones your enemies had forgotten about. In the weeks that followed, the Steadfast and her task force became legendary among both human and alien forces. They struck from unexpected vectors, their antiquated weapons tearing through defenses designed to stop far more advanced attacks. The Bright Horizon's expansion faltered, then stopped entirely as they were forced to rebuild their entire defensive doctrine. But more importantly, the Steadfast had sparked a change in how the fleet thought about warfare. New ships began incorporating old technologies alongside their energy weapons. Hybrid defense systems were developed, combining quantum shields with traditional armor. The best of both worlds, the wisdom of age married to the power of innovation. And through it all, the Steadfast sailed on, its scared hull and weathered crew a reminder that true strength comes not from having the newest weapons, but from knowing how to use what you have. In the end, that was what had saved 50,000 lives and changed the course of a war. Not advanced technology, but the courage and creativity of a crew who believed in their ship when no one else would. The old destroyer had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. But in its finest hour, it had proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy thinks is harmless. The Steadfast had earned its place in history, not as a relic, but as a revolution.